The Best of Our Knowledge explores topics on learning, education, and research. On today's episode, we'll visit two college campuses that are reimagining student housing. And with the censorship of reading materials in schools and libraries at the center of the culture war, The Best of Our Knowledge's Jody Cowan will attend a banned book readout. I'm Lucas Willard, host of The Best of Our Knowledge. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. When you think of college life, you probably picture a cramped dorm and young people microwaving ramen noodles, but a new model of campus living is coming to the lower Hudson Valley. An under-construction senior housing development on the campus of Purchase College aims to give retirees a place to call home, facilitate lifelong learning, and leave an impact on younger students. Ashley Wade has been working in senior housing for 2 decades. She says the baby boomer generation is rewriting the script on aging.
They don't want a rocking chair on a front porch. They want to be engaged in lifelong learning. So it became this kind of perfect mix, if you will, of saying, like, how are we looking at older adults and how are we going to continue to engage them in ways that go beyond a traditional kind of nursing home model?
Wade is executive director of Broadview at Purchase College. This academic year, Broadview plans to welcome more than 300 seniors to its independent living complex on the public college campus in Westchester County. With the first units coming online in October, there will be a variety of room types, from single-bedroom apartments all the way through single-family homes. I joined Wade for a driving tour of the buildings under construction on a corner of the 500-acre campus.
What we're looking at right now are the 46 villas. Now the villas, there are 4 different floor plans, and they are all around 2,000 square feet, so they're really big.
And I want to say that these look like homes. They don't look like, we're not talking about seniors moving into a dorm.
No, you're exactly right. You've nailed it. So they look like houses because they are. I mean, they're 2,000 square feet houses. You can buy a 2,000 square foot house.
In addition to houses and apartments, an assisted living facility is also planned that will house up to 72 people. The housing isn't cheap. Independent living units start at $325,000. But that hasn't stopped seniors from signing up. Most of the units are spoken for. 79-year-old Stephen Shelov and his wife put down the deposit on their new home at Broadview 4 years ago. The pandemic slowed their plans, but Shelov is ready to move to the Purchase campus in the spring.
We're absolutely ready to go, and we've downsized from our house, which we sold, to an apartment where we are now, which is about the same size as what we're going to move into.
Because Broadview is located on a university campus, the complex is being touted as a way to connect seniors with more typical college-age students. Shelov, a retired pediatrician, is professor emeritus of pediatrics and founding dean of what's now called NYU Grossman Long Island School of Medicine.
What I've read about getting old, since I guess I am in that category of getting old, is that it's important to keep your mind active, to follow, if you can, a passion that you have, and continue to engage it in any way that you can. And mine has always been medicine and pediatrics, but medical education and bringing the next generation along. And so this was a perfect opportunity to continue to do that.
Even though the Broadview villas and apartments have not yet opened, Shelov and a group of invited former physicians were preparing to hold a mentoring session with Purchase students on a pre-med track.
I'm Meda Chandwani, and I'm a sophomore at Purchase College, and I'm the president of Pre-Med Club.
Meda Chandwani sees a benefit for students like herself to build connections with retired professionals from the field she's interested in.
When we're in college, we're kind of lost. We just know, okay, we have to show up to these classes, but, what are we going to do with all this stuff that we're learning? So this is a great way to shadow them or talk to them, see what made them interested, and maybe something will spark.
Senior Suhani Kunam is vice president of the Pre-Med Club.
Even if I do know what I want to do in the future, I think this is a great way to kind of help gain guidance on how to approach that, how to build connections, and even if I'm not looking for necessarily how to plan my future, it's a great way just to learn to network with physicians and people who have knowledge of the field that I'm interested in going into.
This mentoring session is the first of the year. A similar event was organized last semester by Shelob. He says he wants to help students make connections or apply to higher education, but it's not meant to replace alumni networks or any available teaching or services on campus.
We're not teaching the basic sciences. They are so valuable and important here. What we are doing is giving them a little bit of supplemental boost to their job quest, their future career, that our experience would be more than happy to do.
Purchase College president Millie Pena says she's seen the benefits of intergenerational learning firsthand.
I actually grew up in a multi-generational household. There was nothing more vibrant beyond reading about the Great Depression than to hear from, my grandmother what it was actually like.
Pena became college president in 2020. When planning for Broadview was already underway. Beyond its educational value to students and seniors, Pena says Broadview will also benefit Purchase financially.
So the lease of the land is actually going to generate $2 million a year that will go, 75% will go to support scholarships to TAP-eligible students, and 25% will go towards supporting faculty.
Broadview is the only university-based retirement community in New York. Broadview Executive Director Ashley Wade says there are about 60 similar models nationwide. While price may be a barrier, she says Broadview has the potential to bring experiences and offerings to older adults who live off campus.
So I think what generally happens, and certainly what Broadview will reach out and do and say, this is the experience for people that live here, but we want to also be able to extend the reach into the wider world as well, right? So when possible, open up programs and opportunities to a population that doesn't live here.
You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. The Sage Colleges in upstate New York operates 2 campuses. One in the capital city of Albany, the other just a few miles up the Hudson River in Troy. Sage's Russell Sage campus is celebrating its 107th anniversary. Originally founded as a women's college, Russell Sage went fully co-ed in 2020, but a recent $4 million gift aims to reestablish an all-female dormitory to honor the institution's history. In addition to supporting the creation of new online programs, the donation from Donna Estevez will renovate the French House, once a learning and living space reserved for French majors. I toured the building with Russell Sage Vice President of Communications, Jennifer Gish.
Yes, this building is the French House. At one time, it was an all-women's residence when the college was still an all-women's school, and it was exclusively for French majors. So only French majors lived in this building, which is where it got its name. And so it will be renovated to be a residence hall for all women as a nod to the heritage of the institution. And we expect that it will be able to house about 15 students who will apply to be in this space. It'll be a special space.
I just want to note the beautiful original floors here and the tall ceilings. When is this building built?
It was built in the 1800s as a private residence and then became part of the college when it was founded in 1916. And every floor is a little bit different. It's really interesting, the wooden floors.
When do you expect students to be moving in?
We're believing that everything should be done with that if there's no delays for the 24-25 academic year.
Russell Sage is a co-ed college, right? So why is it important now to have an all-female student dormitory again?
Well, when our wonderful donor, Donna Estevez, was here as a student, it was still an all-women's college. And that heritage was very important to her. She really feels it's where she found her voice as a woman because of the environment that was just so supportive of that. You know, we like to think that we still have that sense of support for our students, even though we're now co-educational across 2 campuses in Albany and Troy. Holding on to that history is important to us, even as we welcome in students from all backgrounds.
Jennifer Gish is Vice President of Communications at Russell Sage College in Troy, New York. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. This is The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Lucas Willard. As long as there have been electronics, there has been the problem of overheating. Astronauts on the International Space Station have collaborated with the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute to see if microgravity holds the key to preventing equipment from getting too hot. Dr. Joel Plosky, a professor of chemical engineering at RPI, is part of the research team that is finding ways to make cooling equipment in space more efficient. I spoke with Dr. Plosky in late September as his experiment was wrapping up aboard the International Space Station 250 miles above us.
So the experiment that we're working on the International Space Station now has really two components. There's a science experiment that looks at how fluids behave in confined spaces in microgravity when we heat and cool them. And there's an engineering application of the system, which is a heat pipe. And heat pipes are devices, if you own a laptop, for example, or a graphics card, right? You probably have a heat pipe in there. They are devices that are intended to take heat from a heat source to cool it off, right? And transport it over a relatively long distance to where you can reject the heat out into the environment. And the beauty of heat pipes is, as long as I have a source of heat and a place to cool off the back end of this heat pipe, they require no moving parts. So they're perfect applications for space where you want something that's ultra reliable.
Okay, so you have a couple of pieces of equipment on the table in front of us, and one of them is a small brick, and it has many sort of, what do you call it?
These are fins.
Fins. And it looks like a small version of a car radiator.
Right. And that's what it is. It's got a bunch of aluminum fins that serves as the cooling part for the heat pipe, and about 6 what look like copper rods, but they're not solid rods. They're hollow rods. They're partially filled with a working liquid, and they also have a wick inside of them to help distribute the liquid around. And the idea is that the heat source evaporates the liquid. The liquid travels down through the end of the pipe to where these aluminum fins are, and we can condense that liquid and return it to the hot end. So we form this kind of closed-loop system that recirculates inside. And the whole device then works about an order of magnitude better, for example, than if you had solid copper rods trying to remove all of this heat. So the working liquid really enhances the ability of this thing to move heat around.
Is the equipment that's used in space different than what's on Earth because of microgravity? Is this actually able to be used practically, or are other systems needed?
Oh, no. So heat pipes like the one that was on the desk here are actually used in space now. They don't differ very much from the way we design them on Earth, right? So almost every satellite has a heat pipe in it. Mars rovers have heat pipes in them. The Hubble telescope has heat pipes in them. Generally, those are small, but there are big ones that are used, for example, on the Alaska pipeline, and that NASA wants to use for new, say, lunar bases that they're going to build on the moon.
So why is your work relevant to this? And explain this other piece of equipment that's sitting in front of you on the desk here.
Well, for most of the heat pipes, since they're made out of metal, and you would want to make them out of metal so that they work well, you can't see inside. So you don't really know where the liquid is, where the vapor actually is inside these pipes, right? And so it's very hard then to sort of design wicks, right, for distributing this liquid if you can't really see where it goes as the thing operates. We were in particular interested in something called a wickless heat pipe, where instead of having a wick that, say, could degrade over time or clog up, We just use a device that has very sharp corners to move the liquid around. Also, we could make the thing out of glass and see exactly inside where the liquid is and where the vapor is. And we could use an optical technique called interferometry to actually measure what the thickness of the liquid was on the walls of our system.
So this equipment, this is actually going onto the International Space Station?
So the one I have over on my left is actually a prototype of devices that were built around 2010 and flew on the International Space Station in the first iteration of our experiments. The current one was built by a company called TechMasters in Huntsville, Alabama. It's very similar to what I have on the desk here, except we changed the fluid composition that's inside this system to see what would happen if, instead of running a pure liquid like pure water on the inside, we ran a mixture of liquids that would allow us to move more heat around than we can with pure liquid.
Kind of like antifreeze in your car.
Kind of like antifreeze, right, exactly, where I'll have this mixture of ethylene glycol and water. That's kind of what we were looking at here.
So the experiment is to find a way to have an efficient cooling system that, in this case, is wickless. So there's not another kind of material that can clog up or cause a problem. Why is it so important to find systems that are in place that have as little risk as possible for failure?
Yeah. Well, out in space is a very, very harsh environment, right? It's very hard, say, to manufacture things in space, to repair things in space, especially, if you're in microgravity. You don't realize, for example, how much you use gravity every day to fix things, to push off against, to be able to actually exert forces and that sort of thing, even to turn a screw and things like that. So if you can have a device that really has extremely low probability of failure, that's exactly what you need, especially for long duration space flights.
So if something breaks and you need it fixed, how soon is it until you can get the replacement part?
Well, the NASA folks are sort of working on using 3D printing in space so that they'll be able to make any part they want, and all they need is the actual printer, like the 3D printers we have on the ground, and a little storehouse of spare material that they could use to build the part.
So let's go back to your experiment. So this is underway right now on the ISS?
Yeah, I think today is going to be the last couple of hours that we're running. We ran for about a month straight on ISS so far. They're actually going to take the experiment out of what they call a microgravity science glove box tomorrow morning, and then return the working part of the experiment back to Earth, because we have to take it apart and sample the fluid that's inside and make sure that what we loaded into the experiment initially is actually what ended up being in there in the end.
Could you give me a picture maybe or a sense of how much electricity the International Space Station uses?
Oh, my God.
It's got to be a lot. I'm sure it's a ton.
It's a ton. It's a ton, because most of what you see that's up there, right, are either solar panels to collect energy to power the space station, or radiators that are there to remove the heat that the space station generates.
So by improving the cooling systems on the International Space Station, could that save room and weight up there potentially? Are there just physical benefits to having new systems up there?
Yeah, these, if we have, much more efficient heat pipes, then the size of the radiators you need to remove all of this excess heat is going to be less. And that means the weight's going to be less. It's going to be much easier to launch it from Earth, right? It was like around $10,000 or so a pound to launch something from
$10,000 a pound?
Yeah, I think Elon Musk, and SpaceX maybe have reduced that cost a little bit, right? But it's not like $10 a pound.
So how
they really want.
How heavy is this prototype that you brought in?
Oh, this thing I think is, I don't know, it's probably 2 or 3 pounds.
So a good $20,000, $30,000.
Yeah, and almost all of it all of the weight, though, is in the electronics and the housing to sort of keep it safe. The actual glass portion is just a little spectrophotometer cell that you can buy from a chemical supply place. Maybe it weighs an ounce if it weighs that much.
So this currently you have a system that's coming back.
It's coming back.
But then looking ahead, when is the next one going to go up?
Oh, that's really unclear. So the folks who funded the current experiment, it's the National Science Foundation and this organization called CASIS, which is Center for Advancement of Science in Space. And so what we'd have to do is write another proposal next year to National Science Foundation, tell them all these great results we got from our current experiment, and then hope that they'd be willing to put money in to do some additional flights.
Dr. Joel Plosky is a professor of chemical engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. For the best of our knowledge, I'm Lucas Willard. With the censorship of reading materials in schools and libraries at the center of the culture war, one college campus is doing its part to say what some want silenced out loud. A banned book readout was recently held at the University at Albany, part of a symposium on free speech. Students, faculty, and local community members were invited to celebrate the written word and learn about the efforts to challenge, censor, and ban books that some political groups have labeled as problematic. The best of our knowledge's Jody Cowan was there and brings us this report.
The University at Albany recently hosted a free speech symposium with goals of engaging the college and local community in discussing hot-button issues, combating hate speech with open dialogue, and recognizing misinformation. At the center of the agenda was a banned book readout. UAlbany Outreach and Marketing Librarian Amanda Lau said the annual readout serves as an opportunity to showcase intellectual freedom.
I've talked to students every year that will come up to our table with our books and be like, I didn't know, this is like my favorite book. What do you mean it's banned? For what? And I tell them usually, I'm like, sexual content, indoctrinating kids, like numerous, critical race theory is a big one right now. And they're all shocked. And they're like, what can I do? And that's the conversation we want to have. What can you do to make your voice heard against all these challenges of bans across the country?
A couple dozen attendees gathered for the readout, sitting to listen at several round tables. Library staff members took turns reading aloud passages from selected banned or challenged books. Paul Grundahl, Opelka Endowed Director of the New York State Writers Institute at UAlbany, shared an excerpt from writer Ray Bradbury's 1953 dystopian novel, Fahrenheit 451.
The Hearth and the Salamander. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed, with the brass nozzle in his fists, with the great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world. The blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history.
Grundahl, a former newspaper reporter, said the novel's thematic elements of censorship can help inform critically thinking readers today.
We're grappling with these issues. Students are grappling with them. Professors, administrators, the community. They're very complex. Our young students grew up being great allies to people who were picked on and bullied. And now there's people that come to campus who have a different viewpoint that is an ugly viewpoint and challenges that. But we need to have the dialogue and the sort of tools that part of this today is to give some tools to all of us to walk through this minefield of very difficult positions and conversations.
The American Library Association reported 695 attempts to censor library materials and documented challenges to 1,915 unique book titles in the time period from January 1st to August 31st, 2023. The numbers represent a 20% increase from the same reporting period in 2022 and point to the highest number of book challenges occurring since ALA began compiling this data more than 2 decades ago. Most of the challenges were to books written by or about a person of color or a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. Carlos Zamora, library assistant head of access services at UAlbany, read a chapter from Benjamin Alireza-Sign's 2012 young adult novel, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe.
When I got to the pool, I had to take a shower. That was one of the rules. Yeah, rules. I hated taking a shower with a bunch of other guys. I don't know, I just didn't like that. You know, some guys like to talk a lot. Like it was a normal thing to be in the shower with a bunch of guys and talking about the teacher you hated, or the last movie you saw, or the girl you wanted to do something with. Not me. I didn't have anything to say. Guys in the shower? Not my thing. I walked to the pool and sat in the shallow water and put my feet in the water. What do you do in a pool when you don't know how to swim? Learn. I guess that's the answer.
The novel, a coming-of-age story about a pair of Mexican-American teenage boys, explores the intersection of friendship, sexuality, culture, and self-discovery. Zamora says the book spoke directly to his own life experience.
You know, I was a gay Latino teenager growing up in Los Angeles, and I felt like an outsider. But reading this book kind of makes me realize that, you know, it's just so affirming to see that, you know, other kids have gone through this experience. I think it gives me a bit of hope, you know, that kids won't feel alone in this day and age. And I think it's important for us to fight for their right to read these books, you know, to see themselves represented in the pages.
Attending the readout was UAlbany student and aspiring writer Ross Dow. Majoring in psychology with a minor in cybersecurity, Dow said, as a writer, his creative energy feels akin to the punk rock acts of the 70s, like the Ramones and Sex Pistols.
It kind of feels rebellious to read. I liked how it just pushed, you know, freedom of expression, do it yourself. And now I feel like writers are kind of like the punk rock kind of nature, just because all these books, you know, governments will go out of their way to ban them and be like, no, you can't read this, no, you can't have access. But, you know, the rebels are just like, we're going to read and we're going to write and we're going to put our thoughts out there and we're going to be individuals in an individualistic society.
The event featured a display featuring several of the most banned and challenged books from across the country. Session Chair Lau said the readout event helps to bring awareness not only to the increasing prevalence of book challenges, but also how the bans are implemented and who is calling for the restrictions.
A lot of these challenges are being issued by parents or community members that come in public libraries that might not even be part of these communities. Those folks usually will be given a form in which they have to point out what pages that these things are on. A lot of times people didn't even read the issue that they're saying are in these books, and they submit the form and then it goes off to a board or whoever. You have control and the autonomy as a person to decide what you read, what your children read. But no one should have that say-so over somebody else's children.
In September, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee held a hearing on book bans. While Democrats have largely been critical of book bans, Republicans say restrictions are meant to protect children from sexually explicit material. As the UAlbany readout concluded, Lau invited attendees to talk within their groups about what was read and what emotions were brought up. She also encouraged community engagement.
Raise your voice, make your voice heard if you don't want to see these books leave these shelves.
For the best of our knowledge, I'm Jody Cowan.
This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, episode 1725. The Best of Our Knowledge is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan. The latest on all National Productions programs is available via the Airwaves newsletter and our flagship station's website, WAMC.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.